Right, here is a Canyon that has eluded my channel for far too long now. Today we are going for the Canyon Aeroad. I'm just going to show you now, I've weighed the bike before I put the extras on it because some of you don't like it with pedals. So as you can see here, it came in at 7.3 kilos, which as a whole I think that's really nice and light for a big aero bike. Next up, let's weigh it with all the components on it. So we've got the 3D printed stem on here. We've then got some carbon bottle cages, and finally we've got the pedals on as the extra. Okay, all in here, we're pretty much looking at 7.7 kilos. Well, there we are. Here is the bike unboxed and ready to go. This model here is the Canyon CFR, so they're top spec carbon combined with SRAM Red. There are a few other differences that come on this bike, such as the saddle and the wheels, and I'm going to get onto them a little bit later. This bike also comes as the Canyon SRAM Replica race bike. As you can probably see, the paint job is actually really cool up close, so I'm going to bring you in for a closer look in a moment. Just a few things to go over on the actual setup of the bike, and let's start with the handlebars. So the handlebars, you can choose your widths. You can either have a 43 wide, a 41 wide, or a 39 millimeters wide. The way I have it set up here is a 39 centimeters wide, because why not go narrower, because it is an aero bike. When you are putting the handles on, one of the sides here was really stiff, the other side actually went on a little bit easier, but you still had to knock it and try and get it into the right place where you can line up the screws to then screw it in. The handlebars come wrapped for the 43 centimeter wide, so if you want to narrow them to the 39, you have to cut them and re-wrap them. The screws that come from the aero bars are also pre-thread locked, which makes your life a lot easier, as that should stay in place now. The next part for the setup is actually the seat post area. So the seat post actually comes pre-fiber gripped, so it's already got paste in there already, so you don't need to put something yourself. The seat post here is now the newer seat post, so it doesn't have the skinnier part of the front. It covers the whole area here, and that prevents any wear along the seat post. So it's got the updated seat post on there. If you've been following the Aeroad story for the past few years, you'll know exactly what I mean. Next up, just a thing to note for this bike, the matte black on this post is so thick and so matte black, if you lift it up at all, you will scratch it from the fiber paste that's used to hold this carbon in place here. So just be warned, move it slowly, make sure anything's wiped so you don't scratch it as you put it in. A lot of the time for me, sometimes the discs for the brake discs come rubbing and they're just slightly over to one side, and I found for this bike the rear was but the front wasn't, so I'm just going to have to adjust the rear as well. With the setup out of the way, let's bring you in for a closer look. And of course we must start with that paint job. As you can see, there's some very cool fades in there with lots of different patterns, and I think as it's replicated the race bike, I think it looks amazing. Some of you may think otherwise, but paint job is personal preference. Other features that we have on this bike is the Canyon logos have come in white, so they contrast against that dark matte black background, so you can see the Canyon logos. Makes it look more like a race bike. There are some areas on this bike that have come a little bit dirty, but nothing a normal wash won't take off. As I mentioned earlier, this is their SRAM Red model, so of course it comes with a power meter as stock, and SRAM Red is of course their lightest group set from SRAM as well. Other things to note about the group set, the first thing being is that you've got a 48-35 tooth on the front, so you've got the SRAM standard smaller chainring, and then if we come to the back here, we've got a 10-28 on the back. Not personally a fan of the 10-28. If this was my bike, I would upgrade it straight away to the 10-33 and put a longer chain on it. If you're riding around somewhere mostly flat, this is fine, but the person lives here near me around the Surrey Hills and it's a little bit too hilly for an 11-28. You need that 10-33. A second thing that I find strange on this bike is actually the rotors themselves. The front rotor comes as a 160, very normal, but so does the rear rotor. Normally comes as a 140. You actually don't need that much braking force for the rear. You could lock a 140 up no problem. And I think since they're pretty much going all in for this bike, it's somewhere they could have saved weight just by going from a 160 rotor to a 140 rotor. As you can see on the frame here, this is a frame size medium. Canyons tend to come up a little bit bigger, but I'm going to jump on this bike a little bit later and see if I fit it. The next feature about this bike is it comes with this saddle, the Physique Argo Adaptive. I've been using the specialized mirror saddle, so I might have a go on this bike and see if I prefer this 3D printed saddle to the mirror. But it's just a nice extra, a nice 3D printed saddle. This person's bike, they've also opted for a few extra upgrades, so they've gone for the 3D printed Garmin mount on the front here, just saves a few grams, and they've gone for Canyon's carbon bottle cages as well, just to keep those little bits of extra weight down. In terms of the shapes, you can see it has this nice skinny head tube here with the Canyon logos on it. And then if I move over to the forks here as well, you can see they're nice and deep. They're almost like 3 fingers wide. So a nice deep aero fork. Moving along, of course, your classic deep Canyon Aeroad tube. And then the integration with the rear wheel that tends to hug a little bit closer to the rear wheel there. Sticking on deep tubes, these are also very deep as well, keeping the airflow attached to the bike. Finally, this can bring me onto the wheels. It comes stocked with a GP5000 STR, so a very, very fast tire from the get-go. I don't really get bike companies that stock cheap tires. One great thing about this one is that it already comes set up in its tubeless setup on this specific bike. I don't think the lower end models do, but this one does. A small little bugbear of mine though is that it's not quite set up with the stem here. If I draw upwards from the stem, the tire is over to the right. On the front though, they've done a much better job of lining it up. I usually align my valve stem up with the R, so they've got a little bit closer there. Sticking with the tyre area, let's move on to the wheels. And we have the Zip 454 NSWs. A very, very cool looking wheel. You just don't see any other wheels with this much pattern and detail on them. I imagine these are here to trip the airflow to keep it stuck to the wheel. I actually don't know how much faster it makes, but I assume it probably helps a little bit. It of course comes with bladed spokes, specialized. And then finally, the 454 comes with this wavy pattern. And I believe the idea is to add more depth to the rim, but these cutouts here basically allow more air to flow through the rim as well, so it reduces the impact of side winds. The tires themselves come stocked front and back as 28mm, and you can see it fits onto these 454 hook clips nicely. I think it's time to see if me and my long legs fit on this bike. Like I said, it's size medium, I'm 6'4", 192 centimeters, and it's actually a fairly close fit. Canyons do tend to come up large compared to other bike brands. The saddle also does have a couple more centimeters, so I can go a little bit higher on here, even with my long legs. Personally, for someone at my height though, I would still go up to size large, as the reach is a little bit short, especially for a race bike. I would still like to be a little bit longer and further forward on the bike. This of course being Canyon, the head is also adjustable, so you can lower this by 1 more spacer if you want. You can go a centimeter lower or a centimeter higher. I think most people just leave this where it is. But it does come with a tool key that you can just unscrew it and lift it and then screw it back down. Well everyone, this has been my comprehensive look over the Canyon CFR. If I have missed anything, feel free to ask me on Instagram over here, or you can just put it down in the comments below. I've done my best to remember as much as I could for you, but anything I've missed, just hit me up. This has been Cycling Unboxed. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.